Okay, this is our budget workshop number 1, and we did this 2 years ago for our last biennial budget process, and I think that it was rather well received given that we were getting ready to enter into budget season, and when you get into budget season, as Councilmember Wagner knows, and also now our 3 next to not newest council members know, you're going to receive a great deal of information, and it's going to be rather detailed. So today what we're going to do, we're going to do a fund overview. We're going to look at the types of funds we have here in the city. We're going to discuss the differences between an annual and a biennial budget. We're going to review the budget calendar and where we're at in the process to date. We're going to review the fund types, and we're going to review a typical general fund department. We're going to review a capital projects fund, a governmental capital projects fund, and a enterprise fund or a proprietary fund, which are our enterprise and internal service funds, which is our utilities and then our internal services. Those are proprietary funds. And then at the very end, we're going to send you off with the good news of some of the challenges that we will be facing in this budget cycle and in budget cycles to come, most likely. So what I'd like to do in the fund overview, I would like to turn your attention to the cups on the wall here. And I've made them different colors because of the different fund types. And I've got those. And we're going to be talking about these funds, and later on in the presentations, you will see what the different colors represent. But you can see we have quite a number of funds. We have quite a few funds, and we budget for every one of these funds, and we also do financial reporting for every fund. So that means a balance sheet and an income statement on every fund. And for the pink and the light blue funds, we also do a cash flow statement in addition to the balance sheet and the income statement. And we do working capital statements for those in budgeting. So let me go back out. As you know, the City of Auburn does a biennial budget, and what that means, we sit down and go through and build a budget every other year. And why do we do that? It saves time is the number one reason. There's about 55 cities and counties that do biennial budgeting in the state, and the number one reason that it's done is it saves time. And in the off years, we're able to do some planning and do some other things to support the budget and budget policies. As an example, the revenue manual. That was something that we did last year in the off season, pretty much had that knocked out, and then we just waited till after the end of 2013 we could update the numbers to put actual numbers in before we presented it to council. But that's an example of types of things that we can do in the off year. It gives you a longer perspective, the council as a whole, for financial planning. Rather than just trying to get 1 year balanced, your focus is on how do we get this budget balanced and maybe kick the can down the road. It makes us sit back and think about the budget a little bit more. Think about 2 years out, a little bit longer perspective. And it is created in odd number years. And the appropriations may be for 2 years or 2 one-year budgets. Here in the City of Auburn, we do 2 one-year budgets. And there are City of Seattle and Bainbridge, they do a 1-year adopted budget and then another budget that is approved but not available. And that's how they have it in their budget document.
How does that work for them, Shelley?
Well, the same way. They just don't call it, they don't want to approve it. There's a term that they use, and it's slipping my mind right now, but it'll come back to me. But it's a term that they use. But when they roll into the second budget year after they do the midterm correction, that's the budget they're operating off of. When we do a 2-year budget, we do what's called the midterm correction in the off year. And we don't go through as many budget meetings, but we do sit down, we fine-tune the budget year because things change. As soon as a budget's put into place, it's a plan, and by the time it's adopted, it's probably already out of date because we live in a very dynamic environment, and things change day to day. But having said that, the budget is an operations guide, a financial policy tool. It's a communications guide. It's something that we utilize, and what is very important because it lays out our business plan and our work for the coming 2 years.
Shelley, you've done 8 budget adjustments, I think, or amendments.
Right.
Do you have a target to do it every couple of months, or you just do it when you have to?
Well, we do a budget amendment if we need to, but at minimum, we'll do 3 budget amendments a year. We do a budget amendment in March, around March, and that is to take care of carry forwards on projects and things where we had funds appropriated in the previous year, but the project was not committed. Therefore, we roll those dollars forward and reappropriate them in the current year. So in March of this year, we did a budget amendment that we brought funds forward for those projects that were still in process. We also do a budget amendment in June or July. We wait till the audit's done, but what that does is true up our beginning fund balances. We have closed our previous year, 2013. We've been through our audit. If there's been any adjustments, which I can't think of a time when there has been an adjustment required by the auditors that we might have to do, but we wait until the audit's complete before we post the actual ending 2013 fund balances to the beginning 2014 fund balance, because it is a budget number until we close the year out and have finals. So we do that in June, and we also do a budget amendment in December of every year to true up the current year budget to ensure that we have included everything we need to. And having said that, we also do another budget amendment in December of every year. Either we're adopting the coming up biennial budget, or we're doing a midterm correction in addition. So there's always 2 in December, one for the upcoming budget year and one for the current budget year. And so we did 5 budget amendments last year, and we've done 2 so far this year. Now, if something comes up and we need to do another budget amendment, it can't wait till the next budget amendment, we will go ahead and bring something through. This is rather small, but I would ask you to look in your hard copy book. And you see 7-9, it says, "We are here," and that's where we're at in the process. And this is very small printing, but you can see when the meetings are going to occur. The department heads will be meeting with the mayor through the end of July. And then in August, we'll have first of 2 meetings in August, and the balance of the meetings are in September with council. And as we have 5 meetings scheduled, including this one, to work through all these funds and their budgets. So if you've been, I don't know if you've counted our cups up here, but we have 35 funds in the city of Auburn. There are 22 governmental funds. There are 11 proprietary funds. The proprietary funds are the pink and the blue. Everything purple all the way forward to the black cup is a governmental fund. And then the 2 blue cups on the end here are the fiduciary and permanent funds, and what those are briefly, that's our fire pension fund that we pay our retired fire pensioners that aren't under the LEF program, and also the cemetery endowed trust fund. That's the permanent fund. The first cup up there, the black cup, and we made it a little bit bigger because that's the general fund, and that's where it's been referred to in the past as the black hole, because that's where the majority of the tax revenue goes into that fund, and that's where we provide all of our government services. All these departments listed here provide services. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. We have, I think they're pretty self-explanatory. The non-departmental, that fund are costs that aren't associated with any service activity in those other departments that we have, from mayor, administration, human resources, finance, attorney, community development, jail, police, public works, parks and rec, and streets. But we do have people that do retire, and there's some payouts that need to go. We do have debt service payments. We also have other costs from time to time that that aren't really attributable to a particular department, so we put them in what's called non-departmental. And they're paid out of the general fund. Were there any questions on our big block cup?
Are there any restrictions on, I can't get much closer.
Just turn, yeah, there we go.
Are there any restrictions on what we can use the black cup for? For example, if we have a road project that comes out of one of the other cups and we're $5,000 short, can we take it from the black cup?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. The general fund is a fund that can really help any of these funds you see listed here. If one of the funds gets into trouble for whatever reason, the general fund legally can move money to any one of those cups or funds. However, there are restrictions about moving money from those cups back to the big black cup, the general fund. And it's particularly, it is the enterprise funds. Those are rate and fee driven funds. And those funds cannot and should not. They're legally restricted from going back to the general fund. There are a few instances where they may go back to the general fund, such as there is a balance that, but it wouldn't pertain to our city. We're too large. A small city, they can move it back if they know there's a balance. But one thing is the general fund may tax those enterprise funds. There is no restriction on that rate.
Tax or ask for indirects?
The general fund can tax those other funds, like through the utility tax rate.
Okay.
Indirects generally do not go back to the general fund unless one fund is sharing in a cost of something that's being run out of the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next group of funds are the red cups. Those are our special revenue funds. And these are restricted generally by an outside entity, such as the state. And there's state law that surrounds the use of the funds, or how these funds are used, or how these special funds operate. And not always is that the case. It could be city code restricts the use of these funds, such as our Arterial Street Preservation Fund and our Cumulative Reserve Fund. But I think everything else up there that I see is mandated, yes, by RCW about how those funds will be used and the funds that go into them and how they're legally restricted for a specific purpose, and that's why they're called the Special Revenue Fund. Debt service funds, these are funds that, per our bond covenants, when we issue bonds, government bonds that are not proprietary or in one of our enterprise funds in nature, we set up a debt service fund. And basically, we move money in there from the general fund, and then we pay the debt service payment out of the fund. So it's just an in and an out, a place to accumulate the funds to make the debt service payment. And our bond covenants say that we will establish this debt service fund. It lends itself to transparency in the collection of the money to pay the debt. These funds we do budget, and it's all transfers in, except for our LID funds. We do get money from the LID participants to service that debt. Capital projects funds, those are the purple cups. We have 3. Next time we're down here talking about the budget in 2 years, that third one, the local revitalization fund, capital project fund, will probably not be there. That was the fund that was created to do the downtown improvements, and there were bond proceeds that were received to do all these street improvements and improvements in the downtown area. And there is a little bit of money left in that fund, and I expect it's going to be put to work and utilized in this next process. In fact, I know it is.
Yeah, isn't that where we're looking at the parking and the sidewalk?
Right, the
Yeah.
parking and the streetscape
Yeah.
for Main Street. Mhm.
Okay, great.
Okay, and then the other funds, there's the Municipal Parks Fund and the Capital Improvements. The Municipal Parks Fund is where our Parks Director plans all of his capital projects in his parks. There is a little bit of revenue that goes in there from league fees that goes in there, and I think that's why we have that broken out and away from the Capital Improvements Fund. But it works nicely. It segregates our parks projects from our other general municipal projects. And Municipal Capital Improvement Fund, Fund 328, is the fund where all the real estate excise tax goes into, and it's from this fund that we service some debt, and we also do other capital projects. The Justice Center down the street, that was constructed with funding, REIT 1 funding out of this fund, about 50% of it. We've also funded some other projects. We assisted with the funding of the annex building and some street projects, and some of the money is utilized now to assist with the local revitalization funding debt that we have ongoing, along with the state's participation. The next group of funds are the pink cups, and those are our enterprise funds. They're run like a business. They accrue capital, and they depreciate that capital. It is different as the governmental funds do not book capital and depreciate it. It's just spent. It's for operations. And we have, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those funds. We did have 7, but the golf course was there. But we've moved that now into our general fund. It's in the big black cup. And these are the funds, as well as the internal service funds down below the light blue, that we do income statements, balance sheets, working capital, and cash flow statements for. So these require a little bit of work in the department to reconcile these on a monthly basis. And the internal service funds, those are services that we charge to all of our departments. We charge it to our government fund departments, and we also charge to our enterprise funds for services received for equipment, insurance, workers' comp, IT services, and facilities. And there is an overhead methodology and how we go in and apply the rates of what we'll charge each fund. And we'll be going over that in our budget discussions that we have, our future discussions. And then the last two, the fiduciary and the trust funds and permanent fund, we talked about that a little bit earlier. Are there any questions on our funds and how we're organized?
I have a question on the fire pension. Now that we have the authority, does the fire authority take care of the current fire pensions and will eventually get out of the pension business?
No.
Or am I confused?
When the city annexed to the Regional Fire Authority,
Yes.
the city retained the LUF 1 liability,
Okay.
including the fire pension liability.
Okay. So the current firemen are on that, like the one that retires today, would he be on the left one?
He would be either LUF 1 or LUF 2. There's very few LUF 1s. I think we have one active LUF 1 down there, I think.
Yeah.
But this fire pension fund is not even for the LUF 1 funds that we have currently working. Anyone that's in this fire pension fund has long been retired.
Okay.
It's for firefighters who retired before 1970, 71, and somewhere in that era. And that was before the LUF 1 system was there for them.
Okay.
So LUF 1 does pay them. We pay the difference between what LUF 1 pays them and what a percentage, their allowed percentage as a current firefighter is making in the position they retired from.
Okay, thank you very
So
much.
it's kind of a stopgap.
One question. What,
Wait, can you move the microphone closer? Sorry, we just want to make sure Jason is happy.
in that fire pension fund, sooner or later, all of those firemen will no longer be in that fund for one reason or another. What happens to that money at that
See,
point?
that's what I was trying to get at.
Well, the money in the fire pension fund would revert back to the city, but it's going to be like 20, our actuarial analysis has it running out to like 2050, 2060, somewhere in there.
Shelley, left 1 medical reserves, what cup is that in?
That is in the big black cup.
Okay.
In non-departmental.
Gotcha.
That was one
Thanks.
thing I missed when I talked about it. It's not just a retirement. All of our LUF 1 medical and long-term care obligation is paid out of the general fund, non-departmental, the black cup.
And that's the one that should go away sooner, shouldn't it?
No, that'll be here for much
Okay.
longer. It's what they call other post-employment benefits.
Okay, catch-all.
And that one goes out into the 60s, 2060. And that's not just fire, that's police also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay. What I've done, as I said, I brought some samples in from our last budget cycle to look at. So this isn't this budget cycle, but this is what you'll be seeing in your budget cycle, or your budget meetings on each department and each fund that isn't in the black cup. You'll be seeing something like this for every one of these cups. Sometimes there'll be overlap because the department directors that oversee general fund also oversee a lot of these. They do oversee all these cups. Every cup is attached to a director who oversees those funds. And that's noted on the chart that is on pages 5 through 7. Right there. You can see, like Arterial Street is the Community Development and Public Works Director. And the Finance Director has Hotel Motel. Pretty much have most of the all the debt service funds. The mayor is the Housing and Community Development. That should probably should be administrator.
Administrator.
Director of Administration. So there's something we should correct. But these show you who accounts for these funds and these cups, or directs, or oversees, or administers them, however you want to look at that. So what you'll see, beginning on page 9, you're going to see an organizational chart. You're going to see a mission overview, accomplishments, and objectives page. That should be page 10. Department staffing levels, preliminary budget by spending category, and then a budget detail report. And in parks, they have 9 cost centers, or they did in the last budget year. There'll be more in this one coming up because there'll be 10 because they have golf course now. So I did take the liberty of bringing the PDF file, so we do have something to look at here. And here is the Parks Department laid out, and you can see that there's the cemetery, the golf course, the museum, the senior center, as well as arts and events, rec programs, and maintenance of our parks. All these things happen out of the funds that the Parks Director oversees that we reviewed earlier, by these people. And here's a copy of the mission statement for the Parks and Rec, the overview, what the accomplishments were in 2011 and 2012, and what the objectives are for the upcoming budget year. So this would be 13 and 14 accomplishments is what you'll see, as well as then the 15 and 16 objectives, what they're planning on doing in their budget. And then this is the staffing in another format. It shows the historical staffing levels in the Parks Department. And these are full-time staff. Please keep in mind they have quite a few temporary or seasonal workers that do come in and help them out during the growing season. So these are the permanent full-time year-round staff. Then you're going to see a roll-up. And this says General Fund Parks. And this is a roll-up from, it's going to have a couple of years, or a year of actual. It'll have an adjusted budget. This will say 2014 adjusted budget. Then it'll say 2012 or 2014 estimate. And then it'll have the 2 budget years. Anything of note will be included in the text below. Some of the changes that might pertain to why you see the numbers going up or down from year to year. Normally they pretty much go up, but sometimes they go down. Then this is the mind-numbing part. What finance does, what we don't include on these sheets, finance runs all the salaries and benefits. We have a position budgeting module that has every staff position in it, and we run that module based upon the incumbent and what step the incumbent is at and what their level of benefit is. Are they single, no dependents, or are they married with 5 kids? So they look at the budget module, looks at the current position, the current benefit, and estimates out with any contract pay increases. It'll estimate what those salaries and benefits will be for the next 2 years. If the position at the time is vacant, it will look at a mid-range and a family of 4 for the benefit level. And this is where, on this page here, on your documents, it's page
13.
Page 13. This is where you'll see the salary and benefit information. If we were to run the salary, not suppress the salary and benefit information in these detail sheets, it lists every position by the salary and every benefit line. So this document then would probably be hundreds of pages long for each department. So we don't do that. And it's yeah.
Clyde,
So-
did you have a question?
Sure.
So when a department head is looking for additional FTEs, where does that show up here, and how do they?
Clyde, can you move the microphone?
I could repeat the question.
If we could all remember to just keep the microphones close to us when we ask a question.
When a department head requests an additional FTEs, where does that show up in this process, and how do they propose that?
That's a really good question. When an additional FTE is requested, when we sit down with council, there will be, if there's what we call a program improvement, which will be including any FTEs, those program improvements will be rolled into these numbers that you see. If a department asks for does what we call a decision package or a program improvement request for additional employees or services or funds to do other programs, not necessarily hire people, that may not get approved through the mayor's level, and if it does not, it will not be in here, and we don't present it to council because what we bring forward is a balanced budget. On this particular worksheet here back in 2012 and 2013 and 2014, if there were any program improvements, they would already be incorporated into these numbers.
And is that something that shows as a separate line item, or is it incorporated into?
It's incorporated in. And let's see. I think if you look at the 2013-2014 changes, you can see there were a few things put in And you see the last item on page 13, it says mayor-approved program enhancements include $12,822 in funding for the following programs. And you see that there is automatic vehicle location GPS for city fleet. And that isn't the whole cost of the program, but that's the Parks Department's participation in the program. So it's telling you that it's already included in these numbers. But there will be the decision packages of the program improvements in great detail will be provided for councilors' review also at that time. So you can see the full benefit of the program, its costs, but the numbers are rolled into here. I'm not certain if I put a program improvement in or a decision package in for your review. I think I did, but.
Question.
Yes.
Shelley, okay, so what we will get is what the mayor has approved, and it balances the budget. What about if the council does not agree with the mayor's proposal? Let's say we want to add or subtract from a department and the number of personnel. How would that be worked out?
Well, it would be something that the council would do on the floor. But if we add, we must taketh away, generally, or go to reserve funds or do something of that nature.
So that's a discussion we would have, like if we wanted another median expert, to trim ivy or something, that then we would bring it to this group, and then we'd have to figure out costs and where we would get
right.
those costs.
And that's part of these budget talks. When we get into, that's why we have these budget workshops, because you start seeing these come through. You can say, well, we really want to do this and this and this. We're not too keen on that. And so it's like, well, then I look at the mayor and say, is that what would you like to do? And the mayor will give direction of how to move forward. And then things can or may or may not be shifted depending on that.
By the time it gets to you for final approval, there shouldn't be any
There shouldn't be.
surprises. So those types of discussions should have already taken place.
So basically what you're telling us is if we want to see things changed in the upcoming biennial budget, we need to make the discussions now during these workshops rather than wait until we get closer to the council.
Share your opinions on things that you'd like to see. Mm-hmm.
Please.
Yeah.
That's the purpose, is to
When? Which session would you recommend that we do that at?
all of them, the
Okay.
ones, whatever, because
Okay.
what we will do, what we've done in the past, last time, and I'm not certain how I'm going to have it organized this time, but in the past, we came forward with the special revenue funds, the capital projects funds, the utility funds. We saved the general fund for last. But as we move through these funds and we talk about what we're doing in the funds, this gives council ample, I hope it's ample opportunity to voice any changes or considerations, things they would like the mayor to consider to change. Probably on December, the first Monday in December when we're passing the budget.
It's too late.
It'd be, well, yeah.
It would be a little late by then, but
Okay. Yeah.
not absolutely impossible. But there would be probably a later evening than you would prefer to get it to that point.
And I do want to stress that after we have 5 meetings scheduled, including this one. If it looks like when we get down to meeting 3 or 4, we're not going to get through all the material, we will schedule more meetings, because the goal is not to have council feel pressured or rushed through the material. We want you to be able to ask all the questions you think you need to ask, review the material, and be comfortable with the material. There's no surprises intended, nothing. We want it to be transparent and as open as possible.
At which meeting will we start getting the actual numbers for 15 and 16?
They will be available by your next meeting. Yeah. Okay. So these detail sheets, and there's several here, I've highlighted, this is one of the Parks Department's cultural arts. The departments go in, and you see 2012, and this 2012 will be 2014 in the upcoming documents that you'll be seeing. And it's the original budget. This is how our system provides the information, so it's not even the amended budget. It goes and looks at the original budget, and then, and let me find one that's itemized a bit. If we go down to professional services, which is at the bottom of the page, it talks about what they're doing and how much they think it's going to cost. I can't even read that. Like at the bottom of the page, under 573-201-41 down here, it's performing arts fees and services, $57,000 in 2012, $58,000 in 2013, and $60,000 in 2014. So everything is pretty much itemized. And as we were talking earlier today about itemized budgets and spending authorities, this is where our itemization occurs and where the council does give the mayor the authority to enter into contracts to do these things that are defined and itemized in the budget. Does that help tie that discussion in a little bit? And this goes on with all the different departments, and every time it changes to a new cost center, I've highlighted it for your perusal. And the finance department goes in for the interfund services, as previously discussed. The finance department goes in and puts in the IT, the facility, multimedia, workman's comp. What else do we have there? Equipment rental. I'm sitting there looking at the cups. I should just read what I've got in front of me. Insurance. So we go in, we do that allocation, and we'll give you the parameters of how those. We're not going to bring the big spreadsheets and all the details, but we'll give you the overview of some of the assumption and the general direction that we do to come up with those interfund allocations. Were there any questions on these detail sheets? Because if you try to add up all these line items to agree with this first page that we had, where is it, right there? On 2012, 13, and 14, since salaries and benefits aren't in there, in the detail sheets, it probably won't agree, but it should agree by if you added up all the interfunds, and there's several interfunds, and all the other items by how they're reported, it should agree. It will agree. Okay. Let's see, where are we at here? Okay, the next one is the Capital Projects Fund. I'm going to see if I can go to a page here that it's on so I don't have to.
45.
Okay, let's see what we got here. Did it go? Oh, 20. Oh, great. It's not working. Okay. The what?
Thumbnails.
Okay. It's right here. Okay. Okay, the governmental and capital construction projects, this is municipal parks. This budget covers 23 capital projects in this budget cycle. And again, you're going to see the accomplishments and the objectives for the upcoming budget year. And then you're going to see this sheet that has, now in this particular case, like in the last one, you just saw the expenditures because that was a department within the general fund. It was one department of many. In this particular fund, this is the fund, the whole fund that you're seeing here, you're going to see all the revenues that go in to the municipal, or anticipated to go into the municipal park construction fund. And then you're going to also see the capital outlays. And at the bottom, the notes at the bottom of the page, discuss some of the significant things that are going on that like we have nothing in 2011, and then in 2012, suddenly we have all these projects. I bet if you looked at this now, you'd see a lot of this stuff was rolled forward. And I know some of it's going to be even rolled further forward into the 15-16 budget. And I think I did. Okay. I even included, okay, here's, since this is a capital fund, you see the detail is all the projects that they are planning on doing. And this next sheet on page 50 of 126 is a summary of all the capital projects that are planned over the next 6-year period in the Capital Projects Fund. And this is basically the Capital Facility Plan project. And it goes on for 3 pages.
And this is all managed by Director Faber?
Yes. Well, no. Not all of it. Some of it is community development. Like we have things in there like the Fenster levee setback,
Yeah.
Dykstra Park improvement. Not all of it.
The park, the property that's owned by the city that's on 104th, that's by the river or on the river, is that park, it hasn't been developed yet, but does it have a name like?
Is that, you mean like Beer Bottle Beach?
Beer Bottle Beach, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The blackberry
That's not
bushes?
the official city name, by the way, but that is.
Oh, I didn't know. That's quite clever. The 3 Bs. Mm-hmm. Does it, so it's not listed in here to be?
The city did not have it at the time. I think we have the property now. It's been transferred to the city from the state and the county.
In the county. Mhm.
Love it.
9 acres.
It's 9 acres? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Thank
A
you.
lot of beer bottles.
Yeah. And then on page 53, if you look at this page, this is one project. This is Park Acquisition Development. I think this is project number 1 on your 3 pages. Yeah, this is project number 1 on page 50. And this shows you then, it breaks out the project into a greater detail. It talks about the life of the project, if any funds have been spent, and how long the project is anticipated to go. It gives a little description that it's land acquisition to occur based on demand and deficiencies, including trails and corridors. And this, include the state parks property adjacent to Game Farm Park. Projects funding to potentially include the state parks property adjacent to Game Farm Park. And as you know, we did something different to get that property, but this was planning to do that property. And this, these funds were available for other property acquisitions. I'm not certain if they were utilized or not. We did have some other property acquisitions.
So one of the things that I would like to see is, we have our TIP plan for roads and projects, and we have this nice document that deals with some of our parks. Do we have a long-term park plan that has the triple B in it?
I don't know if
I think
master
that
plan hasn't been updated.
He's doing one.
Okay.
We did budget for a Parks Master Plan,
Good.
and I do know it has been started.
Great, that's all.
Yeah,
Can't
the
do
last
everything at
one,
once, but
I recall.
It's been a long time.
Rich, it's
Yeah.
been probably 6, 7,
Just a minute. Let's look at this.
8 years ago.
I think,
and then we have projects planned for the West Hill Lake. Yeah, okay.
I was just taking a quick look at this and to see if there was a planning project in here. I don't see it. But it's either coming up in this biennial budget or it was in a budget amendment, but I do know that there were funds that were identified. And I'll follow up and let you know. I'm almost certain that it's underway.
Okay, thank you very
but
much.
I'm not certain.
Shelley, may I make a recommendation? We did this in the tip as one of the recommendations, that we align the number on also the page, like page 53. You have no number aligned with it being, it's number 1 in the tip, or in the capital projects report, but you see no number 1.
Oh, I see, yes.
There's no relationship between the
Oh, thank you.
numbering system.
That's a good idea, thank you. Yeah, we put them in order, it'd be easy enough then to number them.
Yeah.
But, and behind here, we did put all those projects. We use this fund just as an example. There aren't, what I liked about this and why I used it is the numbers aren't so mind-boggling. It's a lot of smaller projects and we can get our head around it a little bit better. Okay, review of proprietary fund water. Okay, so we've looked at a general fund department. We've looked at this general capital project fund. Now I would like to turn our attention to one of our, page 76, one of our proprietary funds, and I chose water. And it is the most complicated of all of the proprietary funds. Whoops, I'm still on. Here we go. Okay, so to review on the proprietary funds, remember they're both operation and capital in nature. Whereas before we were doing operations in the general fund parks department, we're doing their capital in the capital projects fund. But in a proprietary fund, we do both operations and capital within the one fund.
Why are they sometimes referred to as proprietary and sometimes enterprise?
Well, I've got a little acronym that might help you out. It's called PI. You have enterprise funds and you have internal service funds, and they're both referred to as proprietary funds. And I've always remembered that by PI.
Okay.
An internal service fund is a proprietary fund. An enterprise fund is a proprietary fund.
Okay.
But an enterprise fund is not an internal service fund, but it is a proprietary fund.
Now
Pie.
you're really clear, aren't you?
Thank
Pie.
you.
Would you like some pie?
Maybe next time you could come up with another little great thing to show us like you did with the cups.
Oh, well, we don't have a proprietary fund by itself. It's a term that encompasses both the pink and the blue cups.
Okay.
How's
Thank
that?
you. Thank you.
There is no proprietary cup.
Okay. Thank you. That does help me. I'm a visual person. Thank you.
Okay. So again, we have our mission and overview, accomplishments and objectives. We budget via a working capital statement in these particular fund types, and here it is. I did a little diagram for you. That's page 81. And I think these workshop materials are out on the internet, aren't they? Okay, so if anybody in the public wants to look at them, they're out there. But one thing about a working capital statement, it's not an operating statement on it alone by itself, but it is both an operating and a capital statement. And everything above the red line are the operating activities. It's the revenues and the operating expenses. Everything below the red line is capital in nature, and we do get some capital dollars in. Any bond proceeds would be capital dollars, as well as our system development charges are capital dollars. And this is where we do all of our capital expenses. On this bottom, we record them on the bottom part of the statement. And we work with a working capital balance. And what is working capital? It's current assets minus current liabilities, to show that you have money available current to do the work. And we are I've been working with the mayor on a reserve policy. What should be an appropriate reserve policy or working capital balance for these funds? we're ready, I think, to start talking about it in committees here in the next, as we go through budget. Are there any questions on this working capital statement? I know that there's a lot of numbers, a lot of columns.
Questions on the contributed capital categories, system development, area assessments, outside development. What are those?
Okay, let me get to that statement where I can read it here. The contributed capital is developer extensions and contributions.
Which area is that?
Other resources and uses budget resources other than operations on page 80.
So why would we see, for
below the
instance,
red
on
line.
outside development, a huge amount in 2011 and nothing from then on?
Are you looking at the other uses, the
Yeah,
2.8
other
million?
resources and uses.
Okay,
There are 3 contributed capital line items. there.
okay.
And I don't understand what those are, and I don't understand why one year you would have 2 million and next year you wouldn't have any.
Because 2011 is an actual, and we don't budget what we think we're going to get as the project is completed. The extension, we book it at that time. So at the end of the year, we ask Public Works Engineering to provide us with those that we have been, where we've done the. where
Then
they've
what are
been-
the 3 categories there? What's the difference in the 3 categories?
Which account numbers are you looking at?
101, 102, and 104.
101, 102. Oh, okay. Oh, system development, area assessment, outside development. Okay, the outside development is that helps offset the actual contributed capital. That is the developer extension, was just the 2.175 million. That's offsetting, it's in other uses, includes other things other than the contributed capital outside development. Because we show it as an in and an out, so it doesn't impact our working capital. And the $283,462 is system development charge. And area assessments would be, it's there, I think, if there's an assessment levied or
Like an LID?
it wouldn't be maybe it could be an LID if it's for capital. Yes.
Okay.
So just to carry on that then, so system development charges, the 450, 450, 320, and 320 were what we're anticipating to get in system development charges in those years. But the 283, 462 was what we actually got.
In 2011.
Yes.
So those are budget years: the 450, 450, 320, 320, and the 104 contributed capital outside development.
Mm-hmm.
That was the value of the developer extension, water extensions that were donated to the city, donated back to the city after completion.
Are those also, what's that, when they have to pay back if you hook up at a later date?
Yeah, payback
Early
agreement.
comers.
Payback agreement, are those part of those payback agreements?
The area assessment,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think on a payback agreement, that's where the city collects the money and passes it straight through.
Yeah.
So it's not something we book as a revenue and expenditure. We put it in an account. Since it's not a revenue, it's not an expenditure, we're collecting money that we're turning around and giving to someone else. We bring it in as a liability due to, and it's in, it's out. But I can certainly go back and look at that account and see
Yeah, no.
what, if we've ever booked anything into it.
No, I'm just trying to understand the whole capital accounting process a little better, since infrastructure is hard to build these days. And we all need to understand what all these categories are and how we move money around to get something actually built.
Well, and also on those accounts, because those are over 20 years, talking about the payback accounts, those had a set dollar value if people were to connect to it,
Yeah.
that went back to that individual. So I guess that individual is the one that's going to be the one that has to determine whether they're going to get all their money back in that 20-year period, or if people are going to start hooking up on year 21, 22, and 23, they don't have to pay it.
Although we've talked about using payback agreements to the city for transportation. So it isn't just the other guys, it could be us
For
too.
example.
But, you know, you did such a wonderful job on that revenue package you just heard, manually you did. Might be worth thinking about sometime over the next year or two to do something like that around capital.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah. Knowledge is nice, particularly when it comes to public works.
So I still have a question on that particular contributions capital outside development. We have the closeout data for 2011 of the 2 million, whatever. Wouldn't you think we'd have closeout data for 2012, or there was no action?
Well, there was action.
Okay.
But these are documents that were when we were preparing the 2013-2014
Okay.
budget.
Okay.
You will see the 2015-16 documents,
Okay.
and you'll then see 2013 actual.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And then, of course, if this is information that you'd like for any particular time, we can get the statement for you on any period that we've closed. Let's see where we're at. Okay, where am I here? Okay, let's see. And again, here's our water utility FTEs. I think that was before the working capital statement. And then directly after, once again, is our detail sheets for both operations and capital. And I did put in, Councilmember DeCoursey, on page 95 of 126, I put in a decision package. Let's see if I can go to
What page was that again, I'm sorry?
95 of 126.
Okay, great.
Gives you an idea of what a decision package looks like.
Very good.
There's quite a bit of detail. This happens to be for a FTE. And it talks about some of the statistics that support the request. I think these are, and then in detail, what fund and what account will fund this. Let's see, then we have,
Shelley, I got a question
Yes.
back on page 91.
okay,
There's a term there called contra depreciation.
yes.
And depreciation is an issue that we only finally faced here in the last few years. It hasn't going to show up in these proprietary accounts. How is contra depreciation different than depreciation?
It really isn't, and it's in there because it's an account that we have, but if you go back to page, your working capital statement on page, is it 81?
80.
80? And if you look at, right below the red line, right here, right below this red line right here, it says depreciation and amortization not affecting or affecting working capital. This is that line item, contra depreciation, is the line item that adds the depreciation back into this working capital statement. So it's not, depreciation isn't cash out the door, it's showing that you're eroding your asset. And because it's not cash out the door, we need to book it back in for our working capital statement. And that is the account that provides that number. on this particular statement.
And for benefit of other council members who are kind of talking about depreciation for the first time, is that the reason we're showing these losses in our utility accounts now is we're finally accounting for depreciation. For years, we looked all healthy because we weren't saving money for the next round of
Yeah,
improvements.
exactly right.
But how do we, okay, so we're accounting for depreciation. We're accounting for depreciation. But then as we do road work and stuff like this, and we're replacing lines, does any of that money that's going into the depreciation account come out?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Where does it go?
The money that goes into the depreciation account, we don't have a depreciation account, but when you look at your net income before depreciation, and you have a positive number, you're covering that current you're covering your depreciation because it's positive. If you have a negative number, you're not covering your depreciation. If you subtract out then your depreciation, you see it falls down to the bottom. But if you you have a net loss and you add your depreciation back in, like we do with that contra depreciation account, and then you have a positive net number, you know that you're covering a portion of your depreciation, but not all of the current depreciation.
Okay.
It's just the current depreciation.
Let's say that it's 2% of the overall, 2% of the value of the water company is a project that we're doing. So then, does that 2% account for any of that? Let's say that you got our whole value is $100 million, but we're going to do a $1 million project to replace water lines. Well, that's 1% of that $100 million. Is that taken out of our operational expenses, or is it taken out of the depreciation because we're replacing old lines?
Yeah, okay, so that's a whole different system. That's your fixed asset system. And we track the depreciation. When we do a replacement, generally the line has been fully depreciated. So you might have that line that was originally put in was probably worth, I don't know, $100,000 maybe, or $1 million. And by the time you replace it, maybe we're 30 or 40 years down the road. I think we have 30 or 40 years on our water lines.
Okay.
And if it's 40 years later, it's been fully depreciated. So we're carrying an asset amount, but it's been fully depreciated by the full amount. The depreciation as a total on the balance sheet just kind of continues to grow. We track it under repairs and replacements because.
So is the depreciation schedule that duration, like a 30, 40 to 40-year duration schedule for depreciation, or is it much less than that?
Well, it depends. No, it's a 40-year schedule. For water lines, if memory serves me correctly, it's 40 years.
I think what might be helpful is, it may be not the easiest thing to do, but if there was some sort of a guideline as to depreciation schedule.
Sure.
That would be very helpful.
Yes, I think we have a note in our financial statement. Well, in fact, I do know we have a note in our financial statement that addresses it, and I'd be happy to provide that.
So back to this request for an additional staff member for customer service. Thought we had already talked about this and agreed to do this.
We did.
And we did it.
We did.
Remember, this isn't new.
Okay, this is not new.
Yeah.
Example.
So I was going to say, I thought
We
that
did
Kevin
this.
was doing some reorganization of that area up there to use it more effectively,
Exactly.
and we needed another person. Okay, so this is,
Yeah, these were approved in the last budget cycle.
I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to sneak mine in, you know. It's time for a commercial break.
Uh-oh.
Thank you.
I don't know, it was a 360 number. Whenever I get a call from a 360, I get concerned. I think it's my cousin.
Okay. Where are we at here? All right, so this is all the water detail. We talked about contra depreciation. And now we're down talking about our decision packages. Okay, we're down on page 97 now, the storm. This is remember, this is back in 2013 when we're talking about, or 2012, when we're talking about the 13-14 budget. And these were positions that were approved in that budget cycle. There's a senior project engineer, and they're allocated across a variety of funds, generally water, sewer, and storm. So there was an assistant project engineer. There's been a great deal of, there's been an increase in the projects that we do, and tracking them all takes time. Project managers and support people.
Shelley, I got a question.
Yes.
When we did a budget amendment 8, we put in for 11 additional FTEs, and yet you have this write-up here when we do the biennial budget, but we don't get a write-up like that when we do a budget amendment. Why is that?
Well, we do have one, but I guess we provide the write-up kind of in the, well, not kind of, we provide it in the budget memorandum, and we do require the departments to write something up, and we do have that. I'll include those in the future.
I think it would be valuable.
In our budget
because
memorandum.
It gives us a much better understanding of what that position is and why it's really needed.
Okay.
Because I think we end up sitting in the committee and we know that you want the person, but we really don't understand exactly why. And I think a write-up like this would give us a much better explanation on why.
The decision pack, yeah.
Yeah, it's not, it doesn't say decision package, but we do require some metrics and what's going on and why you.
Well, it also showed some of the workload, caseload over the years and how a reduction was done in such and such year. And it shows a lot of real, some data that really shows the needs.
But you're right. Okay.
Occasionally.
Let's see. And then again, we have the Water Capital Facility Plan on page 103. Or it begins on 102, I'm sorry. I just happened to get to 103 here. And in this biennium, there were 15 projects. And again, we have each project behind that lead sheet, or the 2 pages of the lead sheet. So my purpose was to recap a little bit. I wanted to share with how we budget and account for operations and capital in the different fund types that we have. The general fund is an operational fund. We don't budget capital in a governmental fund. We budget capital for general government operations in one of our purple cups, the capital project funds. However, when we go into our pie accounts, which would be the pink cups or the blue cups, we budget the capital right within that particular fund. So we have to, because we capitalize the asset and depreciate it, as we've discussed here. So that was my purpose of presenting it in that fashion.
I have a question about solid waste.
Okay.
Okay. So solid waste is a enterprise fund. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I didn't know that we could have we don't collect garbage. We contract for someone to do that, and then we collect the revenue, and that's what makes it an enterprise.
It is. It's a fee-driven enterprise.
See, I could see with our water and everything else, because we have our employees out there doing the work, whatever. So I didn't realize that we saw solid waste as an enterprise account.
Yeah,
so every time I come to one of these things, I really appreciate, because you learn more and more.
But we don't accumulate capital in solid waste because we don't, as you noted, we don't have the staff, we don't have the equipment that does the work, so we have nothing that we're capitalizing. We have infrastructure investment.
But we do keep a working capital. And
yes.
You mentioned you're going to go through the process with committees and others of thinking what is an appropriate amount of working capital in any one of those funds. I think solid waste is one that needs particular attention because we accumulated so much in there at one point that we took some out to work on the community center for a lot of reasons I won't explain. But I think working capital is particularly sensitive to policy in solid waste.
So we used solid waste capital for a portion of a park? Is that what you said, Rich?
Yeah, I said for a lot of reasons. You don't want to get into that here tonight. I'll talk to you separately about it. And it was legal.
Oh, I'm sure.
All that,
Yeah.
but there are reasons.
Okay, that's good enough.
Why that was a good thing to do, in my
Okay.
view.
Well, one of the things we talked about, working capital fund, such as the solid waste fund, where we do operations and capital, we really don't do capital in solid waste because we have a vendor or a contractor who does that work. And so
As
what,
part of the big discussion, there is the thought process, at least way back, that someday we might have to have some capital.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
to start
For
up.
some reason, we lost our contractor,
Yeah.
or they went on strike for a year.
Yeah.
And so that was part of the reason. So that's why I'm saying that particular working capital is sensitive to a lot of assumptions that maybe the others aren't.
Okay.
and it does need for cash flow purposes. In all of our enterprise funds, we bill in arrears, meaning we provide the service and then we bill for it. Right there, we need 30, 45 days of capital just because we bill in arrears. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, then, budget challenges. Okay, I'm going to go back, if I can. Go back here. Budget challenges.
Why does it start blinking red at some point? Is it because we haven't used it for a while?
Okay, this begins on page 122. And I put these out because I'd like to keep them in front of council to be mindful of these things as we move through the budget process. As I'm sure all you are aware is that the state Supreme Court has said that the state needs to fund basic education K through 12 to what the legislature in the past or current has required that the education should be. And to fund it to that level, they're looking for billions of dollars to do that. It's called the McCleary decision. And the state hasn't addressed that fully yet. And we anticipate it'll be a large topic of discussion in this next budget session. This is going to be their budget year, this upcoming session. In 2015, they'll be preparing their biennial budget. So the cities, including the city of Auburn, do receive state shared revenues from the state. And one of the biggest ones we do receive is our streamlined sales tax mitigation. And we receive about $2 million. And the reason we do receive it was because of the sourcing change, meaning the city lost millions of dollars when the state did the sourcing change. And the intent is so in the future they could capture sales tax on internet sales if the federal government ever passed that legislation on the federal level. The state needed to have legislation and be properly aligned to collect those revenues from out-of-state sales. So in doing so, the city, who used to receive sales tax from businesses here in Auburn for products and commodities that they sold out of their business there, now it's wherever that commodity or product or service ends up being is where the sales tax goes to, that jurisdiction. So the mitigation is to offset the significant loss the city had in its sales tax revenue stream. The streamlined sales tax 2 years ago, when they were in budget, was on the table. And they came out, when the first time the governor's budget came out, it was gone. It was they had taken it away. And along with liquor revenues and other things. So, and I don't have that up here, but speaking of liquor revenues and cannabis revenue, where the state is retaining more liquor revenues and all the cannabis revenue, where the impacts are down here locally. So we need to watch that and continue our lobbying efforts to ensure that cities, local governments, especially the police forces, do get the funds that they need, the resources to deal with the consequences of legalized marijuana and the larger retail establishments with alcohol, liquor.
Shelley? Streamlined sales tax mitigation, that has an ultimate end on it anyway, doesn't it?
No.
It's the annexation.
That's the annexation sales tax. I don't even know if I put that up here, but
It has an end when we get up above what we would have
yeah.
Normally
received.
gotten, yes.
When voluntary compliance or the federal level, the federal government passes
Main Street tax.
the Main Street the sales tax. And when those revenues exceed, they'll begin eroding at the $2 million. The estimates that have come out of Department of Revenue so far, they estimate if this Main Street legislation goes through on the federal level, the city will see, I think it's $350,000 or something.
That's increased because I think, Largo, when you and I saw it, it was what, 242,000,
Right.
something like that.
So,
Oh, yes.
yeah, so if the Main Street initiative or tax or legislation goes through, we need to keep the pressure on the state that they need to continue streamline sales tax, because 10% of what we're receiving now from those losses will be a significant impact, meaning the city would lose over 1.7 million, or be reduced 1.7 million, and that's all general fund dollars. That's the big black cup.
Well, don't we also lose in that regard because the 2 million threshold where things begin to erode is based on our sales tax at the time SST was passed?
Yes,
Not
absolutely.
what it might be after we have Orion and everybody else doing new stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
New stuff doesn't count.
That's right. So we're not getting growth on those areas that were impacted by those businesses. I guess you'd call it the industries where the sourcing was changed. Not all the industries were changed, like car sales, they all stay here. But all the other industries where the sourcing change is impacted, that any growth in those industries, the city is losing out on. So we're not seeing growth in any increase in that business, any sales tax growth.
We lose twice.
Yes.
I got one additional question, Shelley. And thinking about all the things that could go wrong from the state and the federal level, how many positions in the city of Auburn are supported by grants from either federal or state that could be dropped? You know, if the feds or the state decided to not pay those grants, how many positions in the city are affected?
Grant
Are
dependent.
you talking about state and federal, or just state? Okay.
State and federal.
Well, we don't have really, the only positions that we have right now supported by federal or state would be some of our police positions. But those grants have a termination. They're generally a 3-year period, and then they drop them, or the cost participation may come back at a much lower rate. Mm-hmm. We do have, if we're thinking about capital grants, we do have project engineers who project manage things like M Street, A Street. Mm-hmm. Then if we didn't have the funding to do those projects, we would not have a need for the project engineers.
What about some of the AmeriCorps grant?
We don't have any of those right now.
Okay, we don't.
We haven't had AmeriCorps for several years.
I think that would be interesting, looking at it from a
I
budget.
thought we just-
Did we get an AmeriCorps?
I think in emergency management
Oh.
and community services, Michael and Sarah both have like a half, there's a stipend
Okay.
that they receive for the work that they do.
Okay.
So
It's-
it's like an $8,000
Oh.
grant, $16,000 grant, so it's not
Okay,
significant.
it's not on my
Okay.
radar schedule.
Well, we get a small amount of our CDBG accounts for staff too, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, it does. We can charge 20% of salary, of the grant for administration, so 80,000 thereabout.
I think it would be interesting, particularly from a budget perspective for 15 and 16, to kind of know how much of those positions, how many positions we have, because if those were ever cut, where would we be and how would we adjust our budget?
Okay.
And it doesn't hurt us to continue to advocate with our, elected officials for the maintenance of those things, to keep them even being talked about being on the cutting block.
Yeah, because if we're not aware of them, then we won't be pushing for them, and I think it's extremely important that we do push for those, but we have to be aware of them to be able to push.
Well, I think that in all the cases, there isn't any grant that pretty much funds a full person. It's all cost participation.
Yeah.
We haven't had one that's fully funded. I think we did in 10, 11, and 12. The ARA money, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, did cover some police positions. I think it was five for 3 years. And that's the last full funding. And then we do have CDBG where we don't have to, but we are authorized to use up to 20% of those funds for administration, which is generally a staff position. And then our grant funds for capital projects, which ones we receive. We do charge our project managers, our engineer project managers, against those funds as a part of the project cost.
But even Michael, as the oversight for the CDBG, his time cards when they go in, only 20% of that is
Yes.
through CDBG.
In your budget revenue document,
Yes.
brilliant piece of work, by the way. Another way of looking at it is not by the number of employees that it funds, but approximately 20 to 25% of our total revenues are from federal, state, and county fund sources.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't tell you the number of people that buys, but basically a quarter of our revenue is dependent on other sources that we have limited control over, but perhaps some influence legislatively.
And now, I was talking grants. Now, there's state shared revenues, and I tend to not look at those as grants, but there's state shared revenues. I look at those as revenues that come to the cities because there's activities at the state that have local impacts, and those are state shared to help offset those impacts. So, but if that's
Still almost a quarter of our budget,
yeah.
or our revenue sources.
So it'd be hard to tie those revenues to a specific position, but you could say if we receive, $3 million in state shared revenue, well, you just have to kind of generalize, a average position cost X amount of dollars and divide that in, and there's your FTEs. And moving on to more good news. Demand for services increasing faster and are greater than budget growth, such as public safety and transportation. And the unfunded PERS 1 liability, and I put this in on, now they're behind your page 122. It's page 119, 120, 121. These are slides directly out of a recent presentation from the state actuary to the PERS board. And on page 119, we see the funded status was for Plan 1. The funded status shows that is a negative number, actually. Unfunded liability of $4.8 million. Mm-hmm. I highlighted it, it's circled in red. So that's unfunded PERS 1. So who's paying for that? Well, employers are paying for that in contributions that they are making for PERS 2 and PERS 3 employees. And the employees, and this is rough numbers, the employees pay just under 6%. Currently today, the city pays 9.21% of every dollar for PERS. So the delta between the 9.21 and what the employees paying, which is roughly just under 6%, is all going to fund or towards this Plan 1, PERS Plan 1 unfunded liability of almost $5 billion. Yes, that's billion. So on the next slide below, it says what's the plan, and they want full requirements to fund that plan beginning in 2015, and they want to have PERS 1 funded by 2027. And then over onto the next page, this was pretty startling, 121, page 120, I'm sorry, talks about PERS Plan 1. There you see the unfunded liability of $4.8 billion in the first column, and it shows in 2012 it was 69% funded. In 2013, the most recent actuarial study, it dropped to 63%. And what I didn't present here is the slides as why is that happening. It's one, people are living longer than they had in there. Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's a bittersweet.
Yeah, people are living longer, therefore, than their assumptions that they had previously made. So, and also, I don't think it's a rate of return issue at this point, but it's basically people are living longer. And if we go down to the next slide, it shows, what this next slide shows, I call it as an interest rate shock scenario. So in their assumptions, if interest rates come in at a funded status 1% lower, say they've estimated a rate of return on their investments at, say, 7%, and they come in at 6%, 1% lower, then you'll see in 2013, this is based upon their study in 2013, their funded ratio will drop to 57%. On the other hand, if it comes in 1% higher, then it goes up to 68%. So that they did a little what we call interest rate shock to see, okay, what happens if interest rates move above or below what we've put into our study. So that's kind of, I guess you call it the wiggle room. On page 121.
Can we back up, Shelley? So
Sure.
what they're saying is if it goes down 1%, it goes to 57%, which is a,
That's funding.
$6 billion, less. But if it goes
I-
up, it only goes up 5
Well, the unfunded liability
billion, I mean?
would go up to be 3.8 billion, and the 68% is the amount that it's funded.
So that unfunded liability, it would go from 4.8 billion, and if the interest rate was lowered, which means you're getting less return on your investment, you'd be at 5.9, almost 6 billion unfunded. If the interest rate was 1% higher, your unfunded liability would be reduced to 3.8 billion.
It's about $1 billion each way.
Yeah.
It's actually faster going down than it is going up.
The rock rolls better downhill than
Yeah.
uphill.
Like my checking account.
This is real. It's not if this is going to happen. It's not if, it's not even when it's going to happen. It is going to happen, and it is happening now. We're still setting at 9.21%. We have received information from DRS just last month that they're not going to increase rates on July 1 or September 1 of this year. However, the pension board is meeting this month, and I'm really interested to hear if they are going to increase rates on September 1, because they could very well do that. But if you look on page 121, that chart at the top, and I've highlighted in green, that they are looking at 2015, July 1st, 2015, that's going to go to 12.29%, but we need to add 18 basis points on that. So it's about 12.47. So,
What's that translate to in dollars in the budget?
well, we're running that right now, but it looks like for this will be 18 months of the next biennium, and I'm looking at the numbers, but it's looking, I'm not trusting the number, because coming in around $1 million, and I'm thinking that might be too high, so I'm going to dig into it a little bit more.
18 months.
Yeah, because what we've done is increased in our position budgeting module, we've increased the contribution to 12.5%, or 12.47%, July 1st, 2015. So that'll be 18 months of the biennial budget. And it's showing it came back at about $1 million.
Well, it's not the end of the world. It's 1/3 of what SST costs us.
Mm-hmm. So, and it's not going to end there. I'm going to make.
She's
No.
just full of good news today, isn't she?
No, this is going to go to 15% is where it's going to end up. Now, whether it's going to get there as early as next year, July 1st, it may not, but it will be there
Eventually.
by 16 or 17.
So
It will be there.
So basically, what that's going to do is, we're not quite at 50% of benefits for employees, but this will take us up
Yes.
to about 50% of an employee's cost or pay will be in benefits.
Right.
So it'd be, if he gets 100,000, he costs 150,000.
Yeah, and I hate to even throw that number out yet because it doesn't seem right to me yet until I can dig into it and look at the underlying data to see if maybe an assumption wasn't quite correct. It just seemed a bit high. I'd run some substantive tests. I just took what we're paying in PERS 2 now, extrapolated out for a year, increased it by the 2.5% to see what it cost for a year, and I came in. Of course, it was only what we're paying now. It wasn't budgeted positions, and I came in around $400,000 a year. So this is quite a bit more than what I'd come up with. So I want to look at the underlying data and the assumptions before I toss it out to you. But I say with certainty that it's going to be about $400,000 a year. I'm pretty certain about that and more. And it's going to go above that when it goes to 15%. I think that's where it's going to end up, and that's where it's going to be through 2025, 26, 27, somewhere in there. And then I didn't bring up the sales tax annexation, loss of the sales tax credit. I didn't bring that up in this discussion because it's going to be really in front of us the next budget cycle. But I think that we need to start talking about it now. We're receiving about 1.6, 1.7 million. As it was 1.4, but with the increase in sales tax activity, it's gone up to about 1.6 and a half. So we need to address that. We need to think about this over the next couple of years and come up with a plan, because it's 2017, I think it goes away.
We did some of those kinds of, the previous to my election, the City Council did some of that kind of planning as it related to the early stages of the recession, and it really paid off. Mm-hmm. And you can see that the health departments in the state, some have been anticipating more than others, and you can see the bind that some of them are in and others are not. So I think that it's in our best interest to be looking at how we're going to make up that shortfall so that we don't extend ourselves in some of the other areas and leave ourselves a little more cushion.
Yeah, sometimes a little bit of pain up front is far better than a whole lot of pain.
A whole
later
amputation,
Yeah. And, it's one thing to how to deal with the loss of a revenue. It's another thing when you're getting squished from both sides, where expenditures are coming up, like with this PERS issue, and the revenues are going down. So we're being squeezed. And it's difficult to get your arms around it. Now, let's see. What else did I put in here for you? I think I put a slide in on property taxes. And I just wanted to, this is the slide I want. This is a real preliminary for 2015. This is what we're looking at. I went out, looked to see what our 2014 levy was. It was this down here, this 15.8 million, 15,792,000. Our assessed value is just under 7.3 billion, and our levy rate for this year that we're living in right now is 2.167 per thousand of assessed value.
Can you review the re-levy error that King County made?
Right here? Yeah. Okay. The re-levy error was the city, or the county capped the city at $2.10 per thousand. The city of Renton and the city of Auburn, we have a fire pension fund. And there is statute that allows a city who has a fire pension fund to exceed the $2.10 by 22.5 cents. So the county came back. We approached the county and said, what about this? You know, you've capped us at 2.10. What about this 22.5 cents? And they researched it, and they came back and said, yeah, your cap, because you plan for fire pension benefit, your cap is $2.32.5. So we were capped back in 2013, and if the city had been able to levy, could not even levy everything that was levied in 2012, it was about $350,000 less. The levy in 2013 was about $350,000 less than 2012. So I went back, looked at what we couldn't levy, also the 1% in new construction dollars that we were unable to levy, and it came up to this $666,000. So the county was allowing us to re-levy that, and that brought us in at 216. So in 2015, let me see if I've got, no, that's more budget challenges. We'll go into those in a minute here. So taking this levy from 2014, bringing it up here for the tax base, the 1% increase, new construction, this is an estimate, would bring us just under 16.2 million. Anticipating growth in assessed value, I think that's 4%. I don't have my notes here with me, so I'm talking off the top of my head, but I think it's 4%. And with assessed value increasing 4%, that would bring our levy rate down with this levy of 16.2 million to under $2.10. It'd bring it down to $2.07. So there is some capacity there. Now, there is capacity only because the city has some banked capacity. The city has about $4 million of bank capacity. Mm-hmm. So we're restricted by the highest allowable levy that the city's entitled to, and that's about $20 million. And also to was the 210, now it's the 232.5 cents. So as long as we don't go over $2.32.5 per 100,000 or levy more than $20 million, we're okay.
So Shelley, I believe King County just came out with their new AV, and most of them, I believe, went up.
Way more than 4%.
Yeah.
They did?
They did.
Yes.
They just came out this past week. So
I haven't
think
seen
it was a significant jump.
Yeah, it was
in AV,
in the 20s.
at least for residential.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I did go look. They did have one area done in Auburn. They had a southwest or southeast area Auburn where they go in. And I went in and looked at that, and it was about 4%, and that's why I utilized that number. I didn't see any other areas of Auburn where they'd gone in.
They did the Lee Hill area, was in the paper.
They
In the 20s.
did our area,
They did
too.
our area as well.
Okay.
20%?
Well, okay. Well, I checked this about 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, this just came out last week. In the past
But you can't
week.
believe everything you read in the paper, Rich.
They didn't have it posted yet on their website when I went and looked. Okay, well, this is just giving an idea. I've already provided these numbers, but we certainly can go in. I'll go in and look at the increases. But what that will do right here, by making this number bigger, the assessed value, it'll make this number, the
Small.
rate per thousand, smaller.
Yeah.
It doesn't impact this number here.
So it won't impact the total levy. It'll just do.
It'll give us more
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
And the ability to get into the banked capacity to a larger degree. I think this, we don't, with the $2.07, with the pennies that are left there, and I don't know, what is it, 25 cents or 26 cents or something like that, isn't quite enough to get to the levy, the 20 million levy limit. So we still we can't even go to the 232 and a half.
And there was, when was it, about, time flies, 5 or 6 years ago, we did levy an additional $1 million
Yes.
at that point in time to help with our budgeting process. But that was the only time that I remember ever doing that. Rich, you've been around longer. Do you recall ever doing that before?
Oh, yeah, 20 years ago, the 1% was, I mean, we were doing 6%.
6%.
Yeah, before the,
Well, 20 years ago, we were at 6%. No?
I didn't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No,
no,
Rich.
Rich.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's what he
20 years
said.
ago, we did a lot more than 1%. We did about 6.
But that was before we had the
yeah, that was
1%
Yeah,
from
since-
the initiative.
since 2003 or something, 2, 3. I don't know. The years have kind of
They-
decades,
yes.
decades have all run together. But these are things to think about as we talk about being squeezed. When we talk about losing our annexation sales tax credit, when we talk about this PERS liability, let alone any program improvement, we're still putting the numbers together to see what our general fund revenues are and what the expenses are that we're obligated to with our current programs, and what the revenue will be less than the expenditures. So how much fund balance do we have, and how much do we want to bring forward to balance the budget? And so those are things we need to think about.
So was the whole intent of this presentation to decrease our expectations for wanting additional things added to city government?
It's to make it realistic.
Well, you know,
It is what it is.
They call me Debbie Downer. And I think the whole point is just for us to be mindful, but that, I think a lot of times it's like, well, let's just put it into the budget and we can do it. And we certainly can, but it's all about priorities and choices. And the city does receive tax revenue every year, and it's living within those means. That's what it's about. And and every department director and council member, we want to provide the best for our citizens, and we want to do things that we think will benefit the community and be able to continue providing programs and services that are as good, if not better, than we've done in the past. And so it'd be great to do that, but we have to live within our means. It's choices and priorities.
And at the local level, we have to have a balanced budget.
We do.
We have no option. We're not like other levels of government where they either don't pass a budget or it's so far out of whack. We always, at the local level, have to have a balanced budget.
They issue debt.
Someone has to be at the end of the line.
This is true, but we can also pride ourselves in that fact.
Mayor Backus, you talked
He's getting
last.
very formal now.
This is,
Uh-oh, look out.
You talked about evaluating budgets with performance standards. And this will probably be the first year that we have an opportunity to really delve in and put performance standards on our budget. Would you care to elaborate on that?
So a performance-based budget, I can guarantee you it's not going to happen overnight. No. It's going to be a process that we work through. So little by little, we will convert over to more of that priority-based budgeting and outcome budgeting. So having a more open discussion about all of the different budgets and having the directors all in the room at the same time and buying into their budget as well as the budgets of the other departments, understanding that maybe the priorities of, let's just say, police for public safety and public works for roads, perhaps those become the priorities of the city as a total. So some of the departments may not receive all of what they see as their priorities because they have agreed that their priorities fall at a lower level than the priorities of, let's say, public safety and roads. So having the buy-in to that process is really the first element, in my opinion, of getting us to that priority-based budget down the road. And reading some of the things about priority-based budgeting and outcome-based budgeting, it hasn't always been a success, so we'll never be fully there. The state of Washington is a prime example of that not working fully, but we're going to have a hybrid, if you will, so that we'll do the best of both worlds. But we will definitely be bringing forward priorities of the city as opposed to priorities of each department in the budget.
The performance measures of specific actions are important, but I think financial health of the city is also important. I don't know how many of you subscribe to Governing Magazine, but this was in last month's issue. It sounds like none of you, since you don't recognize it. It's called A Guide to Financial Literacy. And one of the things they do is suggest 10 things that are financial condition indicators: liquidity, coverage, debt burden, operating margin, capital asset condition. There are 10 things here that tell you how healthy you are with some metrics. I think we ought to think about that in addition to performance measures of roads and police and parks.
Well, I think that some of that is taken into consideration when we do our Standards and Poor's or whatever bond rating, that they look at those issues too. But it wouldn't hurt for us to individually have a better understanding of that
To be more literal.
balancing act that has to exist between those things.
And Shelley is always mindful of that as well. When Shelley says she gets called Debbie Downer, she's not Debbie Downer. She's very realistic and very much looking out for the needs of the citizens of our city and making sure that we're not getting ourselves too far into debt. You know, when she provides you with options of, well, here's how we could fund this, she's always going to tell you as well, but here's the risk in funding it this way, so that when you make those decisions, they're very informed decisions. And that's one of the things that I appreciate the most about Shelley is she's willing to work on the funding and willing to be creative in her solutions or options, but she's also going to be very realistic with you to tell you what
It's costing us.
what it's going to cost us in other ways.
Well, the pie of funds that we have to deal with is finite. So how are we going to divide up that pie that's best for the citizens of Auburn?
Right.
That's all this exercise is.
Exactly right.
You know, we all want good police and good water and sewer, but
What price does that come
what-
at?
you know, how in a finite resource,
Right.
how do we
Right.
balance that equation?
And I think that when you're looking at the process, sometimes there is a misconception that any government entity has deep pockets and unlimited resources, and you very well pointed out today that we have to live within our means, and we're all limited to what those resources are. And we talk about this in council meetings where we're doing the business of the city. And I think we have to really share with everybody that we are doing the business of the city because we are in that business mode. And budgeting and financial resources and expenditures all come within the same purview as a business process. And to be fiduciary responsible, we really have to recognize the fact that those resources are limited, and we just need to make the best decisions for everybody possible.
And that's
Maybe it would be nice if Antoinette could order
I was
a
just thinking
copy
that
of
same thing.
that
I'll see if we can get
publication
copies
that
of
you
it.
have, Rich. That would be nice. Because it looks like it's not 50 pages like
No, and it's more, well, it says connecting money, policy, and priorities, so it's kind of a theoretical thing. But occasionally it comes with some things like these metrics I mentioned that I would find useful. For instance, debt burden in here, in this city, has increased so much in the last few years, it's a little bit worrisome to me.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the financial health indicators that they suggest you have on your mind whenever you say you're going to build another score or whatever you're going to do on debt.
Well, I applaud your policy, Mayor, on having these metrics out publicly visible, because as we make these decisions, we're looking for that feedback, input, and understanding from our citizenry as we maybe cut one item to increase another, and
Right.
the metrics are key to it. And the metrics being out open and visible are key to it.
We're never going to make everybody happy with the decisions that we make. I think you're all keenly aware of that, painfully aware of that in some cases. But at the same time, at least we're going to be providing information that will educate them. They may not like the information that we give, but at least it's there for them. And the transparency and the things that we'll be doing going forward for providing information for our citizens on our website, social media, all of the different ways that we're able to communicate with our citizens is going to be critical to make sure that they're as informed as they can possibly be or that they want to be. We can't force them with the information. We can make it available and hope that they find it as riveting as we do.
I think it would be nice as we have future meetings and we have some of the department directors come in and share with us their budget, that they also share with us things that they have cut or efficiencies or whatever, so that we can see that that part of the balancing scale is being met. Mm-hmm. And then it gives us a greater understanding of what the actual service is that we're going to end up with out there in the public. Mm-hmm. And it shows that then they're being very fiscally responsible. Now, not in all situations can we cut things, but there may be some things out there that are not generating the service in relationship to the cost of the unit or whatever. And it would be nice if they were that analytical in their presentations to us.
Right. And so we will definitely do some of that. And as much as my background always says it's about the bottom line, the financial bottom line, not everything that we do is going to be about the financial bottom line. Yeah. There's the human bottom line as well, the social bottom line that we have to take into consideration. Not everything that we do within the city we get 100% return on our investment for. But is it the right thing to do? Is it for the betterment of the people that we represent? And if it is, then we have to look at how important is that to how we operate, and is it one of our core values that we will provide this service? And if so, then what are we going to do to make sure that we continue to provide that service?
Were there any further questions or comments?
I just have one comment. I really appreciate receiving this. You going over everything has really made me realize a lot, and you explained it to where I could understand it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There are a few notes that I did take that I will maybe later on sit down with you and go over.
It's a lot of information, but it's how it is presented, and this is just to get you warmed up. Mm-hmm. You're going to be cross-eyed looking at all these charts and schedules by the end of September.
So be careful what you ask for.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shelley. Great presentation. We look forward to the future ones.
Our next meeting?
When is our next meeting, Shelley? Do you recall?
It's in August.
August.
I think it's the first week of August? Second week?
Yeah.
I think it's on our calendars.
Yeah, it's on our calendar.
It is August 12th.